Of course, today we're here to talk about the quickening, leaping ahead on your spiritual journey. And I'd like to start with a quote from Ernest Holmes, if I can pull that up on my phone here. And that's a better trick than I think sometimes. Technology is both a blessing and a curse, isn't it? Ernest Holmes says, "Heaven is within us, and we experience it to the degree that we become conscious of it." I think we've all had experiences of being in touch with magical moments. Some people have called them mystical experiences. The psychologist Abraham Maslow called them peak experiences. The current lingo is STEs, spiritually transformative experiences. These are powerful, life-changing experiences that we had. Now, for some of you, in fact, I can't see all your faces, but raise your hand if you've had at least one experience, a direct experience of the divine. Time stood still, you saw angels, you felt the presence of someone who crossed over, a powerful mystical experience that you would regard as life-changing. Raise your hand, please, and keep them up. Okay, so many of you that I can see on the screen are raising your hands, and probably lots of other, yes, and we're getting the virtual, the icons are coming up now too. So yes, those are powerful experiences. And what we would say about those is they teach us things in a non-linear fashion. There are things that we learn A to B, B to C, C to D, D to E, and we kind of put them together, stair-step them in our mind intellectually, and come to understand them. But these peak experiences, what might be called a quickening, an acceleration in our spiritual growth can happen like that, a spiritually transformative experience. And all of a sudden we are hopping at, almost like in a non-linear fashion to another level of consciousness, another level of operating or being in the world. And I've spent the last 20 years of my life studying those, researching them, practicing them, and lecturing about them around the country. So I'd like to share a little bit of what I found. I'm hard pressed. I'm going to have to do a little quickening of my own here to compress some of what I'm talking about into 20 minutes, but I will do my best. I'd like to share a PowerPoint with you here. And you'll pardon my technical inability here while I load this up. Can everyone see the PowerPoint now? Yes, good. Aaron? Good. Wonderful. The American psychic, Edgar Cayce, said, "For all must be quickened. There must be a quickening of the spirit," that these are natural, powerful experiences that everyone should be happening. They should be happening to virtually all of us. This is the way to think about these. Oops. We start at the beginning, a very good place to start, according to Julie Andrews. For all must be quickened, there must be a quickening of the spirit. This is the path of the mystic, the path of direct experience. No, don't just tell me about it. I want to experience it myself. I want to feel it. Carl Jung was once asked, "Do you believe in God?" He said, "No, I don't believe in God. I know God is real," because he experienced the presence of the divine directly. And when you think about it, this is the source of all major religions. Somebody goes up to the mountaintop, they have a profound spiritual experience, they come down and they try and translate this ineffable experience to the masses. And they say things like, heaven is like streets paved with gold. That's kind of how I saw it. Or there are angels with wings and they play harps, or, and the masses all scratch their heads and the blue collar types go, "What? I don't get it." And how can you translate any of your most powerful spiritual experiences? How do you find words for those things? And so religion has developed a set of rules or rituals. So we get something like the 10 Commandments, like, don't kill people, it's not a good idea. And leave your neighbor's wife alone, would you? And please don't lie. And hey, try and be nice to mom and dad. Don't steal things. All these rules come up, but they're, in some ways, they're just like a holding place for us to understand our nature and our place in the universe until we can experience those things directly. And so these direct experiences of the divine take us forward much more quickly. I love this quote from D.T. Suzuki, the Zen master, who says, though mysticism has been frequently misinterpreted and condemned, there's no doubt that it is the soul of religious life. That is what gives faith to its vitality, fascination, sublimity, and stability. Whenever a faith becomes conventionalized and devoid, for some reason, of its original enthusiasm, mysticism inevitably comes to the rescue. Okay, so when religious life becomes stale or unmeaningful, it is those direct experiences that we have that change our life and revitalize us. Okay, and even in more traditional evangelical services, there's the idea of being saved, which is a direct experience of the divine. And so, although a lot of religious types are sort of wary of religious experience and not really trusting them, on one hand, they embrace them, but sometimes they're a little overwhelmed by what to do with them. So then that brings us to the question, are these quickenings, these accelerations, we usually think of them as organic or spontaneous, but could we reach out for them and grab them and pull them towards us? Usually people say things like, well, I was up in this mountaintop and I had this amazing experience, and everybody says, which mountaintop? And how were you dressed? And what was the weather? And what day was it? And what time of day? Because we're going to climb up the mountaintop and have that, right? Then people do it and it doesn't happen. We normally think of these mystical experiences as God's grace. And I'm not saying that they're not, but I'm also saying, what if it would be possible to move towards these quickenings, these mystical experiences consciously or intentionally? What if we could flip a switch and be meditating like somebody that's a Tibetan monk that has 20 years of experience? What if we could connect directly with the other side and have a direct connection with people who'd crossed over without the aid of a medium or a psychic? What if ordinary everyday people without years of meditative experience or use of psychedelics could have powerful mystical experiences where they feel like they touch the face of God or see other lifetimes or meet angels or have the gift of prophecy? That's exactly what we're going to talk about today, because all of that is possible and the technologies are here now. I like to call these the sort of spiritual technologies. And although we only have 20 minutes to talk about them, I'm going to try and touch on some of these. And in my book, The Quickening, we explore the following, what I call spiritual technologies, these new modalities that can leap us ahead on our spiritual journey and take us directly into these experiences. We no longer have to sit around and kind of hope and pray that someone will sprinkle fairy dust, angels will smile on us, and we'll have a powerful experience. We can go knock on heaven's door directly. And what are some of the ways that we can do this? By the way, this list is not exclusive. I'm not limiting it to these. I think normally we think about things like, meditation or Tai Chi or yoga or centering prayer. For many people, they've had spiritual experiences reading poetry or listening to powerful music. So I don't mean to limit it to just these, but these are ones that I've researched that some of you may not be familiar with or understand completely. And some of these inevitably will be new to probably all of you because they're unique to my practice. So first, past life regression therapy. Many of you have heard of Dr. Brian Weiss, no doubt, the author of Many Lives, Many Masters. I trained with him over 20 years ago. I've done thousands of both individual and group regression therapy sessions where people have remembered other lifetimes. And people typically believe that these experiences are so visceral and so real for them that they believe them to be true. And they have a direct experience of seeing themselves as eternal. They see that there is more, above and beyond the content of what they see in another lifetime. They may recognize that they are eternal beings. It's like, wow, I had this whole other life before. And I died, and yet I'm still here. And so clearly, life is eternal, and I cannot be killed. The essence of who I am cannot be killed, and I know that because I've experienced another lifetime. Now, I'm not going to belabor that, but if you're interested in past life regression therapy, I would encourage you. There are audios that you can download online and videos that you can watch online that offer past life regression therapy. You can sort of do the home version. And of course, you can work with trained professionals such as myself or others who have been trained and certified in this therapy. And these are experiences that you can have. And people always ask me, don't you have to be really psychic to have those? It's like, nope. I have plenty of people that have never been hypnotized before, that have never had a psychic experience in their life, and they have visceral past life memories that they report are life-changing. Another technology, binaural beat frequencies, we'll talk about, which can have you meditating like a Tibetan monk on your first attempt. Transpersonal breath work that uses powerful music yogic breathing techniques, and a sacred set and setting to catalyze psychedelic experiences without a mushroom in sight. No LSD. Don't worry, I have to worry about the popo coming or what's in this stuff that I'm taking. We actually get there without drugs. It's incredible and hard to believe. Induced after-death communication that came into being in the mid-90s at, of all places, the Chicago Veterans Administration Hospital, where some therapists were working with Vietnam veterans who suddenly started having connections with people who'd crossed over. And finally, spiritual activation, a technique that I've developed that allows us to take a prior spiritual experience and re-encounter that and potentially in the full bloom, the full blossom of its experience inside of you, and even deepen it and widen it and make it more profound than the original experience. So first, what's this Tibetan monk stuff, Greg? If we were to get you to meditate at a very profound, deep, peaceful level, like a Tibetan monk, first we'd have to know what was going on in the Tibetan monk's noggin, okay? And so we could hook him or her up to an EEG machine, an electroencephalograph. And what we would see are long, slow electrical signals in the brain. And that makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, usually when we talk about, oh gosh, my mind was really busy. Well, sure enough, when we see very fast, quick wavelengths in the brain, electrical signals from the brain, when we're busy or anxious or in more normal waking consciousness. And when we're deep in meditation, we see those long, slow wavelengths. Wouldn't it be nice if we could get those instantly? Well, we can. There's a technology out there called binaural beat frequency. Don't let that vocabulary throw you too much. Bi, two, aural, hearing, 2 ears hearing, and beat frequencies, where a set of headphones is used and a subliminal tone is sent to one ear and a detuned tone is sent to the other. And the brain then hears the difference between those two tones, the long, slow wavelength, and starts to resonate with that long, slow wavelength. It entrains the brain and begins to instantly drop you down into a state similar to the Tibetan monk with years of meditative experience. And of course, the more that you use this technology, the more effective it becomes and the better that you get at it. And eventually, of course, you can, traditional meditation will take you there, of course. This is just kind of a shortcut, okay? Like training wheels for your bike. This is training wheels for your mind. It will take you there much faster. Examples of this binaural beat frequency technology include Hemisync. Probably raise your hand. I can't see everybody, but I'll bet there's some people out there who've experimented with Hemisync technology. And this was developed by a radio engineer named Robert Monroe, who spontaneously had out-of-body experiences in the 1950s, did not know what to do with them, and finally recognized that his consciousness was non-local and he could leave his body. And he wanted other people to experience that. And he developed Hemisync in part to help people achieve that, to these deeper levels of consciousnness where incredible psychic and intuitive experiences can happen and deep states of peace and relaxation. Dr. Jeffrey Thompson has a technology called Brainwave Entrainment. This is same technology, different brand name. Sacred Acoustics, developed by Dr. Eben Alexander. Many of you have read Proof of Heaven, the international bestseller about the near-death experience. And Dr. Eben Alexander has developed this using binaural beat frequencies to catalyze these deeper states of consciousness. So you can find this audio online on Spotify or Pandora, or just go to YouTube and you can get it for free. Doesn't cost you a dime. I recommend that you work with Hemisync or Dr. Thompson or Eben Alexander. Try and find one of theirs online on YouTube or Hemisync. Because they are well represented and you'll kind of know what you're getting. You're getting a brand name there rather than just someone who's posted some binaural beats. But you can experiment with these and see how you like them. And of course, the more you use them, the better you get with them. I mentioned this technology called Induced After-Death Communication that was developed at the Chicago Veterans Administration. Imagine you're Dr. Alan Bodkin, a nice Baptist boy that has become largely agnostic in your adulthood. You studied at Baylor, behaviorism, pretty core, down to earth, boots on the ground kind of psychological thinking. And you're at the Chicago Veterans Administration and you're practicing a trauma therapy called EMDR, which I won't go into. And in a 2-week period, 3 of these hard-boiled combat veterans suddenly are having internal visionary contact with the other side. They're talking to dead people, ladies and gentlemen. These guys that don't even know if they believe in an afterlife, okay, and aren't meditators, are having these profound, intense spiritual experiences that leave them in tears as they talk to their comrades who've crossed over, and they make amends and they work it out and say, it's not your fault that I died. Please let go of your guilt and go on with your life. Powerful, profound messages. I can't say enough about Dr. Alan Botkin's book, which is called Induced After Death Communication. There's story after story of these veterans. And Dr. Botkin didn't know what to do with this. He didn't know how he caused it. He didn't know whether it was repeatable, but he went back through his notes as a therapist, and he saw that he did something slightly different in those sessions. And he developed protocols that would allow individual to come to him and literally target somebody who had crossed over and then induce a state of consciousness, which, ladies and gentlemen, is not hypnosis and is not meditative, but a state of consciousness where the brain, the right and left hemispheres of the brain, are constantly chatting with each other and communicating back and forth in brain scans, and allowed them to seemingly talk to people who'd crossed over. Now, are these experiences real? Are they imagined? You know, we don't know for sure, but we know that they are profoundly healing, which is what Dr. Botkin said. He said, you know, we can't say for sure, but what we can say is these experiences are life-changing, as these soldiers, these combat veterans who had severe PTSD, suddenly many of their post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms began to disappear with a single IADC session. Can you imagine how revolutionary this is? Okay, so they sort of did it under the radar for a while, but just before he left the VA, Dr. Botkin did a study of his initial 84 IADC subjects. And of the people that came in to attempt the therapy, 98% of the people reported they achieved some kind of contact. Now, what's this contact like? Sometimes it's very subtle, just a sense of the presence of the person who's crossed in the room. Sometimes it's profoundly deep, and they have conversations, like one-sided conversations with the person who's crossed over. They have they felt them being hugged, or a hand on their shoulder, or a kiss on the cheek. I practice this therapy. I was actually the 15th person in the world certified to do it. I've had people smell the cologne of the person who's crossed over, or, oh yeah, I'm sure this is my Uncle Bill because I can smell the whiskey on his breath as he's talking to me in my mind's eye. And they literally had olfactory experiences where they smelled the breath of this individual. So 98% reported they achieved contact. 96% achieved a full resolution of their core sadness. In other words, at the beginning of the session, Alan would ask, how sad are you about the loss of this person? And invariably, they'd say like 8 or 9 or a 10 on a scale of 0 to 10. And at the end of this hour-and-a-half session, 2-hour session, the client would report they were at 0 or 1. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? Now, of course, they still miss that person, but that gut-wrenching, you know, just sort of knife in the stomach, twisting around and around. If you've ever been in the pangs of intense grief, it's miserable, it's physical. And these literally vanished in a single session. They continued to miss them, but it was no longer unbearable. 94% of the people believed they had actual contact with the deceased. Now, does this mean that they did? No, it does not. But it means it was very credible and very believable for the people that had these experiences. And most importantly, were these people true believers? Were they, you know, interested? Can you imagine a bunch of Vietnam vets like, oh, we play with the tarot cards every weekend and meditate? No, only 8% of this group believed prior to the experience that contact could even be made. Dr. Botkin likes to say, it doesn't matter whether people believe in it or not. They can have the experience anyway. So this is not about meeting some imaginary expectation, okay?
Right.
Yes?
5-minute warning.
Yes, ma'am. So we'll move along because I want to touch on a few more of these therapies. Transpersonal breath work is this powerful modality that allows everyday individuals to have powerful, transformative, mystical experiences like you've read about in books, or people that experimented with psychedelics without the use of psychedelics. And this work is based in the research of Dr. Stanislav Grof, one of the founding fathers of transpersonal psych. and reflects over 40 years of research into non-ordinary states of consciousness at the University of Prague, at Johns Hopkins, and the Maryland Psychiatric Institute, and Esalen. Now, Groff studied 40 years of hallucinogens in a controlled setting. He would give murderers, prisoners, people with bipolar disorder, with major depression, schizophrenic people, measured doses of hallucinogens. And he would play music for them, and they would have these profound experiences. And then as they came down from the experience, from the aftermath of the chemicals, he would ask them what they experienced and help them integrate and understand their experience. But in the mid-70s, some of you guys are old enough to remember this, President Nixon pulled the plug on all the research with hallucinogens. And here's Dr. Groff, having spent his life studying this work, and he said there's got to be another way to get into these states of consciousness. And so he developed holotropic breathwork, which combines yogic breathing techniques, powerful evocative music, drumming, sacred music from around the world, powerful movie scores that you're not going to be Gone with the Wind or Star Wars, you know those, but sort of more obscure ones that are moving and evoke emotion. Group support and process and expressive artwork at the end of these workshops that allows people they do this breathing for 3 hours, and they would have these profound experiences where they'd see past lives. They would meet with the angels. They'd talk to people who had crossed over. They'd work through childhood traumatic experiences. The kinds of things that might take 6 months or a year in therapy were compressed in time. And they made huge leaps forward in their spiritual journey in a single 3-hour breathwork session. Douglas Rushkoff, the author and social activist, writing in a book called How to Get High Without Drugs. Yeah, gotta love that title, right? He said, we can't overemphasize the power of these breathwork techniques. They serve as absolute proof that profoundly intense psychedelic experiences are available without the chemicals. And guess what? Best of all, when you guys, I'm not talking to you. I mean, I know you would never do acid, but the person next to you I'm talking to. For those of you that have done drugs, when you drop acid, you're along for the ride. If it's a bad trip and it gets ugly, you can't stop it. But in breath work, if you don't like it, you simply stop the breath technique and sit up and open your eyes, and the experience begins to fade away. You're in total control of whether you want the experience or not. And you can't do that with drugs. So I'm going to move on and share one more idea with you. There is a new treatment for trauma called brain spotting. And I've used it to develop a technique called spiritual activation. And brain spotting is a very important leap forward in healing trauma. The results are astonishingly helpful. Many traumas and symptoms can be rapidly relieved. Published case studies, dramatic as they are not exaggerated. This is from Dr. Norman Deutsch, the author of the bestseller, The Brain That Changes Itself. Brain spotting is this incredibly powerful technique that can eradicate childhood trauma. We can take a traumatic childhood, a rape, sexual abuse, theft, a life-threatening experience, a car wreck that you're haunted by and is traumatically implanted in the brain, and we can wipe it out in maybe 1 to 3 sessions. It's absolutely astonishing how fast it works. One of the ways brain spotting can be used, which use fixed eye positions to trigger neural networks in the brain, is we can use it to strengthen a positive experience. And so I began to wonder, what if we used brain spotting to take the most profound spiritual experience anybody had ever had? Like, what is your most profound spiritual experience? Now imagine we can go back in and not just think about it and remember it, but relive it completely, or even go deeper than the original experience. Now, I could tell you story after story, but we don't have time. But I want to share with you an experience that I had with Trisha Barker. She's given me permission to talk about this. And Trisha, you might have seen her on Dr. Oz or read about her in the national literature. She is the author of the best-selling Angels in the OR and a near-death experiencer. And we took her near-death experience, and we, using both fixed eye positions to trigger the original neural networks associated with the memory, and she relived the experience. And here's what she had to say. It was an amazing session. If anybody's gone to traditional therapy, they owe it to themselves to try something new, to make quick breakthroughs. I literally felt my brain changing during the session. I have more energy now, like the release of some trauma or confusion frees up more energy. Best of all, it was so healing to be back in the presence of the light of God, When I asked her if the original experience of your near-death experience were a 10, how close did you get to it? She said, I was at a 9. And in fact, both of us were sitting there we wound up doing a 4-hour session with tears streaming down her face. There was light filling the room is what it felt like for both of us. So I kind of, as a therapist, sometimes I kind of get the spillover effect, sort of the collateral light of heaven from Trisha's mind, I guess. So this experience can be used to recatalyze traditional, original, powerful spiritual experience and strengthen them. Now imagine we played that over and over in the brain, and you really got to know that experience. And now when you close your eyes and go into meditation, your brain is hardwired to God. And now you can tap into that hardwiring and go there over and over and over again. And when you're sad or overwhelmed or anxious, you can tap into that. You don't have to dream or wish you could have that experience again. And by the way, in my book, I give you details as to how to do this at home. We don't have time today, but this can be done at home. You don't need a therapist for this technique. It'll work better if you got one, but there's full instructions as to how to do the spiritual activation technique at home. It's starting to catch on. I've got therapists that are doing this now in Denver and in Boulder and are having phenomenal results with it. And I've seen amazing changes take place. So I know I'm tight for time, Aaron. I want to close with this thought. The human opportunity is to transform flashes of illumination into abiding light. This is a quote from Houston Smith, the famous theologian who wrote the Religions of the World. And the idea is, if these are powerful mystical experiences that change our lives, why don't we reach out for them? Why don't we go for them? Why don't we reach out and grab them and have more of them? And then we build upon them and upon them and upon them. And we probably can't live in that state of illumination 24/7. But every time we go there, it changes us. It strengthens our faith. It makes us being able to live out of that state of connection to the divine more and more. And we live the kind of lives that we say we want to live. And we live those lives in peace and joy and happiness increasingly. So I hope you will consider the concept, whether you explore any of these ideas or not, that you don't have to wait around to have these powerful mystical experiences, that you can go after them directly.